So Venezuela has said that they are prepared to confront any attack from the United States, saying, quote, "We will fight if you dare set foot in Venezuela." This follows a significant deployment of U.S. military vessels to the Caribbean that Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, called earlier today, quote, "the greatest threat that has been seen on our continent in the last 100 years. Now, depending on which source you look at, everything is on the table now, from regime change to the snatch and grab arresting of high-value targets, missile strikes on cartel locations, or, of course, nothing at all. Nothing ever happens, right? That's always a possibility. So diving into what we know so far, which includes, by the way, a former senior U.S. official calling to make Venezuela great again. Probably not something Maduro wants to hear. Reported in Newsweek yesterday, a quote from the Venezuelan Defense Minister Patrino Lopez, he declared that the country is ready to confront any attack from the United States as tensions escalate over Washington's military presence in the Caribbean. Quote, "We will fight if you dare set foot in Venezuela." His statement was accompanied by a show of military readiness as Venezuela has reinforced patrols along its maritime borders and airspace and deployed 15,000 troops to the western frontier with Colombia. Additionally, here we have the Venezuelan defense minister last week talking about a massive drone deployment to the coast. And something we have to keep in mind when he says that is not the short-range quadcopter type drones, although Venezuela likely utilizes those as well, but the longer-range munitions like we see with the Iranian Shahed-style drone that they've used to attack Israel and that the Houthis have used to attack commercial shipping and Israel, and then the Russian Garan-style drone that they use on a daily basis to attack Ukraine. There are close ties between Venezuela, or the Venezuelan regime right now under Maduro, and Iran, Russia, and even China. So when we're talking about long-range drone threats that could put U.S. military vessels, albeit in international waters, at risk, we have to consider some of those long-range strike capabilities. Venezuelan President Maduro had a session earlier today with international media where he said that this is an absolutely criminal and bloody threat. He said, quote, "The greatest threat that has been seen on our continent in the last 100 years is in the form of 8 military ships with 1,200 missiles and a submarine targeting Venezuela." Now, that's a little overestimation on his part. It's not quite the build-out, that are the capabilities that we have in that U.S. Navy deployment. We'll get into those details here in a minute. Real quick, wanted to let you all know that we just stood up a Patreon on that. We're going to be doing, of course, ad-free, sponsor-free videos, regular AMAs or Q&As. We'll try to churn those out as often as possible, and then subscriber-only videos. So videos that will only go out to the patrons and the supporters. So for anybody able and interested, that link will be in the description below. As always, thank you all so much for your continued support. Now, continuing on with some details here, we have a graphic put together by Ian Ellis over on X, excellent resource when tracking naval capabilities and deployments around the world. And looking at this, kind of a breakdown of the U.S. military deployment, it looks like 4 guided missile destroyers, each capable of carrying 32 Tomahawk land attack missiles, 1 submarine with 12 Tomahawks, so that ends up, if my math is right, 140 total Tomahawks that could be deployed right now or in the near future off the coast of Venezuela. Additionally, we have the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group, which is 2,200 total Marines set to be used for amphibious operations. That is where the concern of some sort of invasion is coming from, is that's what Marines do best, or one of the things Marines do best, is they are well suited for an amphibious invasion. In terms of air power, multiple P-8A Poseidon aircraft and MQ-9 Reaper drones and quite a bit more. So there's a lot. This is a significant package, and we're going to look at some experts here in a minute that say that is a lot more than what you might expect in some sort of traditional counter-drug type operation, which is in turn fueling the idea that more might be at play. I mean, the Venezuelan ambassador to the United Nations earlier today said, quote, "This is a massive propaganda operation to justify what the experts call kinetic action, meaning military intervention." And our government here in the United States is not exactly doing a great job of downplaying this. To reassure people, this is strictly a counter-drug operation. We've got Representative Carlos Jimenez, one of the only U.S. lawmakers that has said anything at all about this in recent days. He said, quote, "Our prayers are with the courageous men and women of our armed forces as they approach the coasts of Venezuela," which isn't wrong. Like, I get it. Yes, support our troops 100%. That feels like they're going off to war, the way he's presenting it. Again, there's nobody talking about this at all, which is a major blind spot in what might be coming around this operation. We just don't know. We saw a few days ago the White House was asked about this, and the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, said everything is at the president's disposal. And that's kind of been it entirely. And we've got a lot of naval resources heading south. To add a little fuel to that fire, we have former U.S. National Security Advisor Michael Flynn put out a statement last night saying, quote, "Let's make Venezuela great again by capturing these terrorist group leaders, get them off the streets, and help the people of Venezuela have a vastly better life. The citizens of Venezuela don't deserve to live under the tyrannical rule of Maduro or any of his henchmen." And this is where some of the confusion is coming in, is we're getting statements from the White House that this is strictly counter-drug. And then when you turn to anybody, again, Flynn is on the outside of the administration, but he does, I would argue, still have some pull with decision makers in and around Trump's close advisors. He's talking about regime change. Get rid of this guy that's up top. So you can understand why there's plenty of conversation in that direction. But it's not just these unofficial advisors. We've got traditional outlets here in the United States explaining, hey, actually, this would be a good thing. Like the Wall Street Journal that just yesterday ran an article titled Trump's Venezuelan War Games, where they say, is this U.S. warship deployment preparing for more than just fighting drug cartels in the Caribbean? Quote, what might require this many high-value U.S. military assets is an effort to pressure Mr. Maduro to abdicate or perhaps oust him, even without boots on the ground. Has Mr. Trump made a decision to make that step? They argue that toppling Maduro is a worthy goal, saying he's running a criminal organization out of Caracas that traffics in humans, drugs, and weapons. His closest allies are Russia, Cuba, China, and Iran. His regime has worsened Venezuelan privatization, and more than 8 million people have fled, triggering a humanitarian crisis across the Americas. His government sows Cuban-style revolution in the region. They do add a little caveat here, saying if the U.S. is not committed to finishing the job, an intervention might not be worth the cost to Venezuelans and U.S. defense capabilities elsewhere, which are already spread thin. But a Venezuela free from Nicolas Maduro is in the U.S. national interest if it can be done. And we'll get a little personal opinion thrown in here. Maduro's not a good dude, and him being gone would likely result in a net positive for U.S. national security at home and abroad. But I go back to the fact that this is not really in the press at all. I don't think many people recognize that we have significant naval assets sailing south towards Venezuela, whether this is just a pressure operation or there's Tomahawks or boots on the ground, which I do think is a very low probability at this point. It's not really being discussed. It looks like a decision has already been made, and they're in the process of implementing it. The Financial Times took a little different approach here. They had one person, albeit an unnamed official that they say was involved in discussions about the naval operation, talking about snatch and grab operations, like sending people ashore, covert operations, or special operations forces to go in there and pick up members of the Maduro regime to bring them out and have them stand trial. They said, quote, I am 100% sure that the aim of this operation is to arrest Maduro and get him out of power. Fortunately, unnamed official on that one, that would be, of all of the options, arguably one of the most risky. The amount of support that's needed to do that is incredible. But they have some other ideas here as well. They say the U.S. deployment this month of at least 8 Navy vessels aims to disrupt drug trafficking routes across the southern Caribbean, officials have said. But it includes 3 guided missile destroyers, an amphibious assault ship, a guided missile destroyer, an attack submarine, and more than 2,000 Marines. Much more force than is typically used to intercept small, fast boats carrying cocaine. And we've said it in recent videos. They can do that. But this is a lot of firepower, right? This is bringing a Tomahawk to a knife fight, like the Tomahawk land attack missile, right? They say the U.S. administration keeps Nicolas Maduro on edge with this deployment, but very few people actually see Marines coming ashore. They say that is probably what the Trump administration wants, to rattle Maduro and his oil-rich South American nation with a show of force, but not to risk U.S. lives. They quote Evan Ellis, who served on Mike Pompeo's staff when he was Secretary of State in the first administration, of saying, quote, Trump is much more comfortable with threatening the use of force than actually using force. And I would argue that actually kind of plays out when you look at a lot of Trump's foreign policy decisions in Trump 1 and now. He has carried out a significant number of strikes around the world. Very few times that I can remember where he has committed forces, especially in an area where we haven't already been. So the use of Tomahawks, to me personally, seems much higher on the likelihood in the probability chart than actually putting boots on the ground. And they say one possibility highlighted by experts is that Trump may decide to fire Tomahawk cruise missiles from Navy destroyers or the submarines at targets inside Venezuela. These could include cocaine-producing laboratories or bases for Colombian Marxist guerrillas involved in the drug trade and operating from Venezuela. So a couple different options there, but we have to give a little airtime to the idea that nothing ever happens, because I feel like that's always the winning bet. This one here is coming from Jeff Ramsey, a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arsht Latin America Center, where he says, quote, "This deployment of naval assets is an important show of force, but it does not mean that the United States will engage in military strikes. This would fit with recent actions by Trump that seem to support engagement, including sending Special Envoy Richard Grenell to meet with Maduro in Caracas in late January. It would also explain why the United States continues to seek cooperation with the Maduro regime on deportation flights. There were 9 flights to Venezuela last month, and the vast majority of those were chartered, paid for by the U.S. government, and sent directly from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention facilities in Texas, Florida, and elsewhere to Caracas. These flights would not be possible if they were not in regular communication between Washington and Caracas." So a couple of things there. There's definitely an argument that we're just trying to pressure Venezuela. No doubt that could absolutely be the entirety of what's at play here. But it's also kind of interesting that we clearly have this open line of communication with the Maduro regime and the Maduro government. But at the same time, when you look at statements coming out of our government right now, it was like 2 weeks ago, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that they were doubling the reward for any information leading to the arrest of Nicolas Maduro, up to $50 million. And when you hear any U.S. officials talking about Maduro, they always preface it by saying he's not a legitimate leader. He's a terrorist, head of a narco cartel. So on the one hand, we've got that framing of this is a terrorist. He's not a legitimate president. While at the same time, behind the scenes, we must be in communication with at least people inside of the Maduro regime, if not Maduro himself. So can you see how this one's a little bit confusing still? The one thing that I'm definitely keeping an eye on is what press starts focusing on this and starts talking about this and diving into what is exactly playing out here. Because as of now, technically, everything's on the table. And as we ran through there's some pretty significant people making arguments in different directions, everywhere from full-on regime change all the way to nothing is going to happen here, guys. This is all just a show. So we'll keep an eye on it and see where it goes. Again, for anybody interested and able, of course, we do have the Patreon linked in the description below. Thank you in advance for anyone there. Your support means the absolute world. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.